So welcome back everybody to Moderate Mods, and yeah, today we're going to be dealing with the 2010 Ford Crown Vic, and yeah, this is going to be our first American car on this series. So yeah, let's see what this car can do. So yeah, big, large American car, rear wheel drive, got a sizable 4.6 litre V8 engine. Not the most amount of horsepower though, as you'll see when we get into the setup for this event, because we'll look at the stats outside of the acceleration times and top speed, which we'll look at before we upgrade the vehicle. So yeah, it's got 250 horsepower and 297 pounds-feet of torque from its 4.6 litre V8, which I've already mentioned. But yeah, it does weigh a hefty 4,057 pounds, which is quite a lot for a car that isn't particularly large or particularly roomy inside. So yeah, it's always been a big surprise to me that these cars weigh as much as they do. But it does have 50-50 weight, 55% weight at the front and 45% at the rear, which is reasonable. It's certainly not as much as I was expecting in terms of weight at the front. So yeah, and as you can see, handling and braking is reasonable, but acceleration, due to the lack of power and the immense amount of weight, isn't all that great. So yeah, nonetheless, let's see what this can do for the 3 laps that we're going to give it the chance to set a time at. I'm worried about the automatic gearbox, though, in all honesty. It's only a 4-speed, and the 4th gear is pretty useless, to be honest. You change into it about 130, and yeah, it just does not seem to want to gain any speed at that in that gear. So yeah, in all honesty, we're going to be dealing with only 3 gears here. 3 that are any of use, that is for sure. So yeah, this is a police interceptor version, so I don't really know what the difference is between the normal one and this interceptor version. I imagine maybe the suspension is better, the brakes are better. It's generally a bit more tough underneath to deal with police goings on. But I'm pretty sure the horsepower, torque and size of the engine is the same. Now, even though the handling is reasonable for a car of this size and weight, I think in all honesty the only reason it's any good is because the gearbox strangles any of the horsepower and torque that it's got. So yeah, I think the handling is still something we're going to have to improve, even though it's far from the worst that we've had on this series so far. Especially since this car is going to need some horsepower and torque upgrades due to the sizable weight that it's got going on. Fair bit of understeer. Can't quite remember the times that we've had for previous vehicles on this series, but I imagine this should be the quickest, given it's got the most power, the most torque, and it's a more modern vehicle, but it's also the heaviest one that we've had by far. Did I miss that? No, I didn't. It's also a very slowly revving engine as well. It doesn't really feel like it's got any guts to it, to be honest. And then there's the fact that it's not even all that high revving either, not even 6,000 RPM. So yeah, this car was well out of date even by 2010 standards, never mind years beforehand. So much understeer. It's ludicrous. Always amazes me that these kind of cars were police cars in America. Because you look at the stats, you look at the horsepower ratings, you look at the weight of the vehicle and everything, and it looks like something that would be extremely useless for everyday police activities, and yet they're obviously successful to enough of a degree to have been used, and presume are still being used in some regards in some places in America. So Yeah, always surprises me. Especially when you see those old, 1960s, 1970s films or TV shows that have those really rather large boats for police cars, and yet somehow they were able to do the job that they are required from them. So it's always surprised me, to be honest. I can't imagine driving a car like this at speed in real world conditions is all that fun, to be honest. Right, let's see what we're going to get for our final time. We should improve on our second lap. Yes, we are, for the first time on this series. So there we go, 1 minute 11.305, which I think is quicker than even the Rover did in its original top speed, in its original guise, as well as its upgraded form. So yeah, that's fairly quick. So yeah, nonetheless, let's get to the garage and see what this car can do. And by seeing what this car can do, obviously I mean in terms of upgrades. I didn't misspeak at all there, don't tell me otherwise. But yeah, as you can see, a really rather large saloon car. Pretty much more space in the back though than there is in terms of rear legroom for everyone else, but yeah, still a really rather large saloon car. So let's look at the acceleration stats before we go around upgrading this vehicle. So yeah, 0 to 60 in 7.9 seconds, which is pretty woeful for a 250 horsepower, near 300 pound-feet of torque V8 car. 0 to 121.7 seconds, which again is fairly lackadaisical, which is no surprise given the really rather slow and sluggish automatic gearbox. Reasonable top speed of 141, but again, with an extra gear and a better fourth gear, this would be far quicker at the top end. So yeah, undoubtedly we are going to be changing that gearbox, because yeah, that's easily the worst part of this car. We'll only go with sport transmission though, because the race transmission is really not something that will be put on a daily car like this, for instance. So yeah, we'll give it a sport clutch. We'll lighten the driveline up a fair bit, so we'll take off 17.3 pounds. So with the gearbox and the clutch, we're already a fair few pounds down. Hopefully we can get it below 4,000 pounds. We're going to widen the tyres front and rear, purely because yeah, they're not the widest of tyres, as you can see. They're only 235 at the rear, which is reasonable for this car in its stock form, because that gearbox really does strangle all of the power. But now that with the gearbox is better, we're going to make those tyres wider up at the rear and wider at the front as well. So now it's got a little bit more in the way of grip. We'll give it street brakes, because the brakes are actually fairly reasonable on this car. We'll give it street suspension, so we'll knock it down by 0.49 of an inch. We'll make the roll bars sport roll bars, so we're automatically knocking off some weight, and then we'll get rid of the spare wheel. We'll reduce the size of the battery and get rid of any tools that will be inside the vehicle, so that's another £109 off. So now we are below £4,000, which is good. That's exactly what we need. We'll make the flywheel a sporty flywheel, knock a few more pounds off. Might hopefully might make it a rev a bit more freely. We'll increase the engine block to 5.2 litres. It's not a massive increase, obviously it's only 600cc or thereabouts more, but it should help. Then we'll give us some street cams to increase the rev limit on this car, because it is really rather low. Then we'll improve the air intake, as well as manifold and throttle body, and give it a better exhaust, a sporty exhaust. So what does that give us? 302 horsepower. We'll knock the valves up a little bit as well to 305. Also helps reduce the weight as well. So yeah, 305 horsepower is what we're going to stick with, as well as 338 pounds-feet of torque. So that's a fair decent amount of horsepower there. Not a massive amount, but 55 horsepower and less weight, wider tyres, lower suspension, better brakes, a lighter flywheel, and yeah, lighter driveline, and yeah, all that lot should hopefully help. So let's install all of that, see what that does for us in terms of acceleration and top speed. We might well improve the gear ratios as well if it needs be. So yeah, now we're doing 16 6.743 seconds, so we're more than a second quicker to 60. We're a good near 4 seconds quicker or thereabouts to 100, and we'll now do 152 miles an hour, so a good 10 mile an hour or so quicker than last time. Gearing wise, well yeah, as you can see the gearing is quite long, so we'll reduce that a fair old bit. Has that given us 5 gears, that gearbox? No, it hasn't for some reason. We're gonna go and get it, get the race transmission then, because 4 gears really is not enough. In all honesty, I expected it to give us an extra gear, but it just hasn't. I know the acceleration and the launch has dropped down as a result of that, but so has the weight, so that is helpful. But yeah, really need at least 5 gears in a car that has more than 300 horsepower and is going to be used to racing. So yeah, there we go. We'll reduce the ratios a little bit more. We've got the full 6 now, so that's a good sign. What does that do for us? We'll make it an even 4. So yeah, that's actually helps us even more. We're now only 6.561 seconds to 60. We're under 17 seconds now to 100, and we're doing 152 miles an hour plus. Obviously we were close to doing 152 before, but now we can concretely say that we will do 152. So yeah, let's apply that setup, and yeah, let's get out onto the track again and see what we can do in comparison to this car in stock form. So we're still in C class, which is the same class that this car was in stock form, but we're well up on the top end of that now. So yeah, we should see some remarkable difference, I hope, in performance, handling, and the time overall. So yeah, let's see what this Crown Vic can do in comparison, because yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, because I do like the fact that this car is in the game. It does make the variety better. We don't have many American cars like this on this game. And instantaneously, yeah, you can see this is a lot faster off the line. It's got a lot more poke on the go, and yeah, as you can see, we're even up to 6,000 RPM now, which isn't a massive difference over what it could do originally, but it does mean you got more to play with while driving around or doing a little race like this. But it's a little bit more lively at the rear end as well. Did say that gearbox was strangling the power on this car. Granted, we do have more power now, but yeah, I guarantee if you just did the gearbox on this in its stock form, it would be more lively at the rear end regardless. But at least now we have those wider tyres, lower suspension, we've got the better brakes to deal with the extra power and speed, and we're also less in terms of weight as well, which will also help our braking and our overall control. So much less understeer as well into that corner. As you will have seen before, we were understeering off onto the dirt before, which yeah, really did slow us down. And to be honest, even on our first lap, we're not all that far behind at 1 minute 15.309. We did a 1 minute 11.305 in stock form as our fastest lap, so we're only just over 4 seconds slower. We'll easily make that up, and hopefully then some. So yeah, the whole point of this series is obviously to show that you don't need to make massive changes to a car to make it better, or at least make it more competitive in its class or the class above. I've really not done all that much to this car, in all honesty. 55 extra horsepower, about 40 extra pounds-feet of torque. Not a couple hundred, nearly a couple hundred pounds off the weight, and that's pretty much it. Outside of obviously the lower suspension and the better brakes. Better suspension all round really with the anti-roll bars, but yeah, you don't really have to do all that much. I know I do a lot of upgrades to certain vehicles for a couple of my series, but that's for that series. So yeah, there we go, 1 minute 8.702, so nearly 3 seconds quicker. Let's see what we can do on our final lap. But yeah, even though I do a lot of upgrades for extreme off-road silly builds and how fast will it go, they're the ultimate extreme of what you can do with upgrades. This series, like I said, is purely to show that you don't have to go that far to make a car more competitive. You can go for the more middle of the road up in terms of upgrades, and still have a fun competitive car to drive along with. And even though we've not done that many upgrades, it does make a clear difference in terms of speed and handling. As you can see, we've now increased our gap again between the car that we had in stock form at 1 minute 7.1 seconds, which is infinitely better than what we had with the original stock version of this car. So yeah, there we go. That is more than 4 seconds quicker than what the stock car could do, which is mightily impressive, and that is our fastest car that we've had on this series so far around this circuit. So yeah, mightily impressed. Again, this car had very few flaws in general. In all honesty, the gearbox was the primary flaw to this car. The power was decent, the torque was decent, it was just generally that torque, that gearbox that was strangling that power from the substantially large V8 engine. Obviously the weight is quite significant as well, which obviously ruins the performance in a lot of ways and does waste some of that power, but the gearbox was the main issue, and yeah, the gearbox has mightily improved our time and as well as fun with the car and usability as well, because yeah, now you've got more than 4 gears to play with. But like I said, even that 4th gear on the stock car was originally really rather awful. So in all honesty, you only had 3 gears to play with. So yeah, you got more gears to play with, you got higher revs to play with. So it just makes it a more enjoyable car to drive as well as a faster one. So there we go. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.